One of the challenges in the West is that very few people are regularly sharing the gospel.
Hey, the requirements that Jesus has are high, and I'm not going to lessen those to try to increase somebody's likelihood to yes. It's a bait and switch kind of thing.
For some reason, we've kind of dissected that seed where salvation is here and kingship is here, and no longer is it together. And so in this principle of abundant seed sowing, man, we've got to make sure leaders, church leaders, individuals, people, that as we go out and abundantly sow the seed, that it is the full gospel that we're sowing. Drum roll.
An actual drum roll or just a pretend drum roll?
Well, I'm hoping that maybe Chewy in post will put an actual
could simulate the drum
roll in there. That'd be nice. Disciple Makers Podcast, guys. Something like that.
Yeah, that's nice.
What do you think?
Nice.
I like it.
I don't know if we can afford that.
I like it a lot, though.
Okay.
But anyway, here we are. Jason Ishmael,
That's
Josh
my name.
Howard.
Indeed.
In
a series about disciple making, but what are the 10 principles?
Boom. The Big 10.
You and Bobby Harrington put this together. A storehouse of wisdom and another guy.
I mean, God had his 10 commandments. We've got the 10 principles. That was probably blasphemous right there.
That's pretty close, actually.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. Well, we're at principle number 5, which is overseeding the gospel, which is, I mean, honestly, I love this principle. And really what it's about is throwing the seeds of the gospel abundantly, which is great. In the best disciple-making movements in the world, the churches that are seeing the most fruit are throwing a ton of seed. We do have like a short 6-minute video on this on our 10 principles, a part of our website at Discipleship.org, if you want to see that. But in this podcast, we're going to basically dive deeper into it. I hope to give a couple of simple tools that you guys could look up that could help you. But at the end of the day, when we try to implement the principle of overseeding, I do want to set us up, if you're good, with okay. Throw it to me. So just set me up. Okay, thanks.
I just tossed you a lob, man.
For those listening, you don't know, you have no idea what just happened.
Yeah, you have to imagine it, I guess.
I do, though, for those listening, have an Arby's cup because we just had lunch, and I'm taking a sip.
Not sponsored by Arby's.
So that's really good. Not sponsored by Arby's. Maybe one day. So overseeding the gospel, here's the principle, okay? And it's a farming principle. And we've said this before, but it's important to repeat this over and over again because one of the challenges in the West is that very few people are regularly sharing the gospel, and they're rarely getting out there and throwing the seeds of the gospel. And so it's important for us to remember this over and over again. It's a farming principle is what it is. Your harvest will always be in direct relation to the amount of seed that you sow. So you plant one seed, your potential harvest is one stalk of whatever, or one tree of whatever. You plant a bunch of seed, your potential harvest is a bunch of fruit. And so for us, so often, somebody may ask, hey, Josh, why do you think the churches in India or China are growing so rapidly and our churches just aren't growing like that here? And it's like, well, are you throwing abundant amounts of seed?
We have good advertising.
Right, exactly.
Great
That's a seed,
billboard
right? Like, yeah, isn't it a seed if it says, come check us out Sunday at 10?
Not quite.
No, that's not the gospel seed. It is a seed of some sort. But the big idea is, how can we personally live this out and get as many people as possible having Jesus readily on their lips, ready to talk about him, ready to share him with others, ready to talk about his goodness and his beauty and how amazing he is. It's really, at the end of the day, evangelism or sharing the gospel, discipling people to salvation is really helping people fall in love with Jesus. That's what it is.
Yeah.
An illustration I'll use, I may have even used it on a previous episode. I don't know. I forget nowadays.
I always forget what you say. So
thanks.
This is, it's always fresh. That's why I always hear you freshly.
Well, thank you, Jason. That's why I love you. But the illustration I'll use is like if I wanted to set my son up with your daughter, okay? This is hypothetical.
And you got some great sons.
Yeah, I do have some good boys. But let's say I did. What I would not do is go to your daughter Sophie and say, ugh, your life is terrible. You are a horrible person. What you really need in your life is my son. Like, he will set you straight and make everything better. Like, that's probably not the way I'd go about it, you know? What I would do is get out a photo, show how handsome my son is, talk about his personality, talk about what he's good at, what he likes, and really get her interested in who he is as a person, right? Why can't evangelism be like that? Like, why can't we just pull out a proverbial picture of Jesus? Look at how beautiful and amazing and incredible and loving and gracious he is. Don't you want to know more about him? I mean, that's way better than like, you are such a horrible, terrible, you know, it's just not, we're trying to get someone into a relationship with someone else. That's what we're really trying to do.
Yeah.
And so I think sometimes we don't throw the seeds of the gospel because we view evangelism and discipling people to Jesus sometimes in a very negative, confrontational way, rather than it being, hey, like, let's look at how amazing Jesus is. Are you interested? You know? What do you think about that?
You know, it's interesting to try to find. We're looking for good soil, right? But we never know the soil before the seed is in it. I mean, you've shared this so many times. It's one of my favorite things that I ever hear you talking about. One of my very favorite things that I ever hear you preach.
That's sweet.
And I didn't forget it.
You didn't forget this one.
But you talk about the parable of the sower and the seed of the soil, and not knowing what kind of soil it lands in. You always make kind of a joke about the farmer being kind of crazy. What farmer's going to sow like that? We talked about that in a previous episode.
Yeah, he's a blind, crazy farmer.
Yeah. But it's important that when we sow, that we're sowing with the intention of something good happening.
Yeah.
That we actually want to try to foster that seed to grow. Now, we don't always get to be the person that seeds, waters, and harvests. Jesus says that you might have one part of those processes, but I don't want to sow a seed in such a way that would make it almost impossible to care for that seed for whoever the Lord sends next.
Yeah.
That they would actually have to undo damage that I have done. And so I think about in my life, I love growing things. I think especially growing things from seed because seed is really cheap.
Green Thumb Jason is what I actually called you. I called you that this morning, actually.
Yeah, that's dead. Yeah, right.
He was looking at trees in our neighborhood.
You did say that, didn't you?
I did say that, yeah.
Oh,
you were looking at trees in our neighborhood and said, oh, those might rot because there's too much mulch.
Yeah, I forgot that you said that.
Anyway, go ahead. Green Thumb.
Well,
tell us, what do you grow?
When we put seed down for germination, every seed even has requirements as to how deep in the soil it's supposed to be, or if it's supposed to be in the soil at all, or if it needs to be exposed to the light. They have requirements for temperatures. They have requirements for how much light that they get, how much moisture. There's care in seed sowing.
I'm sorry, I fell asleep a minute ago.
Whoopsie. But you don't sow seed with no regard for the growth of the plant. And so when I think about sowing gospel seeds, we need to be asking questions right now of the culture that we're in, not how do I tailor the gospel to the culture, because the gospel is never going to change. The gospel is the gospel. But how do I sow that in a conversation with someone that has the most likelihood of the blessing of God and fruitfulness and success? So that means I'm going to be high fidelity. So I'm not going to mess with the gospel. I don't change the gospel so that somebody will say yes to it.
Yeah.
The requirements that Jesus has are high, and I'm not going to lessen those to try to increase somebody's likelihood to yes. It's a bait and switch kind of thing.
And how often do people do that, man? They really change the seed. Like the seed is, I mean, biblically speaking, is the gospel. And how often, man, do we try to sugarcoat that thing, change it so that it's not really what it is anymore? Yep. And then you're planting really a seed that cannot germinate. It can't actually produce fruit, or if it grows, it's something that you never intended for it to be in the first place.
You planted something other than the gospel.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
And so then when it doesn't work, somebody says, I tried Jesus and it didn't work. Jesus told the Pharisees, who had their own version of truth, their own way of seeking the Father that wasn't the Father's way.
Yeah.
And he said, when you win people over, you've made them twice a son of hell as when you started.
That is high praise from the King of Kings to somebody.
Can you imagine,
Grief.
because people who tried their way said, yeah, I tried God, and it's not real. Whoever that is, whatever that is, it's a sham. I tried it, it didn't work. There actually wasn't fruit in my life. So I think about, in our culture right now, it doesn't mean that we don't talk about sin. It doesn't mean that we don't regard the urgent consequences of our lives and the significance of our lives. But it is the kindness of the Lord that leads us to repentance. My posture, even in conviction, that is calling people to repentance, because that's the gospel, is not devoid of love and kindness. It's actually saturated in them. And so I think about, for instance, and this is something I'm experiencing, I have been experiencing for, easily the last 15, 20 years, in especially younger people. I would say anybody under the age of 35 right now, but especially Gen Zers. We start having conversations about, you can go to any college campus in the country and have a conversation about humanity. And they are willing to talk to you about humanity, human flourishing, human problems, why people are important, why we should care when people are suffering. We have lots of people in this world that are doing things about human suffering because in a lot of ways, it's a secular humanist society, and a secular humanist is going to say, hey, humanity is the most important. We're going to, above all else, we're going to do no harm. We're going to collectively try to come up with the best ideas for human flourishing. And here we are standing back going, but you're all bad people. You're all terrible. And they're like, Woody, hold on. We're good people. We're trying to do good things. And we said, no, you're all liars and horrible. like, what if the conversation shifted a little bit? Because eventually I do get to have a conversation with a secular humanist and go, let's be honest.
Yeah.
It's a struggle to be good, isn't it? It's so hard not to be selfish.
Yeah.
And instead I get to hold up Jesus, who quite literally is the very definition of what it means to be a human being, to be made in the image and likeness of God, to have dignity and to have significance, to have a beautiful life is the life of Jesus.
Yeah.
He restores humanity to the human race. To sow that seed, hey, human being who's searching for something and is trying to find life and restoration, God already sent it.
Yeah.
And man, it is amazing how much farther I get in that conversation.
Yeah.
When I start with humanity and then get to tell them about this human being named Jesus.
Yeah.
Who was God.
Yeah. That's good, man.
Yeah.
That's so good. Let's pivot slightly after that, because I think that sets us up really well for this next part. An issue that I see a lot when we're talking about throwing the seed is that in America especially, the seeds that we have thrown historically have been a partial gospel. And it's been a major problem, right? And so that'll take us to, when we are abundantly sowing the seeds, we want to make sure that it's the gospel seed we're sowing, and the one that Jesus preached, and the gospel that Jesus would preach if he were here. And so we want to make sure that's true. What we've seen over and over again, man, especially in the United States, is we're leading people to a what some would call a salvation-only gospel, where it's you get a get out of hell free card, you get all your sins forgiven, all the grace and mercy, you get set free of the stuff, but there's no real expectation or bar for you as a follower or a disciple. So we've kind of the gospel Jesus preached was a kingdom gospel. It was about, you're now under a new rule and reign in your life. You're under a new king. You're under new leadership or new management. If we want to, use you've ever seen those signs? It's like, we're under new management now, right? A bad restaurant. It's like, okay, don't worry, new management. Hopefully it'll be better.
Earth under new
right.
management.
Yeah, right. But the truth is, like, a lot of times we're leading people to Jesus as Savior alone, but not as King of their lives, and not as people who are fully surrendering to that. And so, although it's difficult to talk about this stuff publicly, what most people in America need, and who are sitting in our churches on Sunday morning, is actually if I want to be a little bit, I don't know, crass or whatever, is actually a second conversion. from Jesus is only Savior to Jesus is King and Lord of everything in my life, and I'm going to lay it all down before Him. And what for some reason we've kind of dissected that seed where salvation is here and kingship is here, and no longer is it together. And it's actually creating consumerism. It's creating people who don't really look like Jesus, but they proclaim Jesus with their mouth. And so in this principle of abundant seed sowing, man, we've got to make sure leaders, church leaders, individuals, people, that as we go out and abundantly sow the seed, that it is the full gospel that we're sowing.
Yeah, imagine having Jesus, if you're at a restaurant and you get full 9 yards. You get the appetizer, you get the best meal on the menu, dessert for everybody. We're not even sharing. Everyone gets dessert.
Their own dessert.
Everyone gets dessert. And you run up the biggest bill you can, and then you realize you can't pay for it. This is the situation that we are in giving ourselves to the sins that dominate our lives, to giving ourselves to the dominion of sin and darkness instead of the dominion of God. And so imagine, though, if Jesus comes over and he's like, hey, guys, I got good news. I'm picking up the tab. Great. Man, this Jesus guy is awesome. Got deep pockets.
Yeah.
Very generous. Hey, Jesus, thanks for picking up the tab. Thanks for picking up the tab, but he kind of hangs around and lingers a little bit. It's like, well, what? Jesus, I don't mean to be rude, but my friends and I are trying to have dinner. Appreciate you picking up the bill, but I mean, if you don't mind, could you go away? We've got our way, and you're getting in the way. Jesus does not pick up the tab so that we would disinvite him from the table. It's actually him who's saying, come and eat. To think that we're going to receive payment for sins from Jesus, but then not invite him to sit at the table when really he is inviting us to sit at his table. Yeah. What an absurdity. Yeah. But we do this when you create a culture and a theology that says and actively answers this question at every turn possible. What are the minimum entrance requirements to heaven? Yeah. You will not find in the New Testament anybody approaching Jesus saying, what is the least that I can do to follow you?
And still get in. Yeah.
He says things like, let the dead bury their own dead. He who puts his hand to the plow and looks behind him is not fit for service in the kingdom of heaven. Hey, foxes, they have holes, and the birds of the air, they have nests, but the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head. You still want to follow me?
Yeah.
Hey, rich guy, sell all your stuff and give it to the poor. Then you can follow me. That's the thing that you lack. Yeah. This does not sound like a minimum entrance requirements guy. This sounds like a king who's comfortable saying things like, a new command I give you, love one another. Well, hold on, I thought that was an old command. No, love one another as I have loved you.
Yeah.
That he has the authority to issue new commands. His name is Jesus. His title is Christ.
Yeah.
Christ is the title that you give the anointed one, the Messiah, that indicates priesthood and kingship.
Yeah.
Obedience is not optional if we believe he's king.
Amen, man. Yeah.
That is part of salvation.
Yeah. And it should be. But we have dissected that and divided it and divorced it just to make it more palatable for people. Like, oh, it's okay. Like, just come. And we almost expected, well, they'd figure it out later, I guess. I don't know. But what's happened is many people haven't. And so they think that they're good with God. The tab has been picked up. Yep. And they can kind of keep living at least a mediocre good life. And everything will be okay at the end of the day. But in all reality, I mean, I love that illustration you just said because I think it's so powerful and transformative if we allow it to be what you just mentioned about, like, man, are we basically telling Jesus, listen, you take my sin, take my guilt, take my shame, take all the bad, take all the junk, pick up all the tab of all my sin, but I don't want any more of you, And that minimum entry requirement thing, I mean, how funny is it that that's really a lot of times when people theologically debate, that's what it's about. Yeah. It's where is the line? Yeah. Is it when you confess with your mouth? Is it when you're baptized? Is it when you speak in tongues? Like every denominational line, they draw it for the minimum requirement. Yep. And it's like, Jesus, you're right, dude. Jesus never drew that line. Like, it's always, dude, I either want all or nothing. I mean, that's really Jesus's heartbeat. Lukewarm, neither hot nor cold. spitting you out. Like I don't want half-heartedness. I don't want lukewarmness. I want all that you have because I've given you everything I have.
What a great way for if you're the enemy of the advancement of the kingdom, what better way to confuse us than to get us clogged up even in seed sowing, to have to now argue about, well, what is the seed of the gospel? What is the gospel exactly? What isn't the gospel? And we've all, I personally, I've participated in this. I hook, line, and sinkered the arguments, and I'm confident that right now that there are people that are listening to what we're talking about that are coming from a variety of theological backgrounds.
Absolutely.
And if they're anything like I was a Roman Catholic kid with Southern Baptist mom. And cut my teeth in a charismatic church, got saved in an Assemblies of God church. I'm in a non-denominational church now. My parents even tried out a Messianic Jewish synagogue when I was a kid. I've experienced a ton of what Western Christianity has to offer, and every one of those cultures has a minimum entrance requirements to heaven thing that we put
Absolutely.
forward. And what's so funny is that now that I look back, most of our arguing. And I don't think it's a bad thing to have conversations about salvation, about soteriology. Those are healthy and good things as we seek truth together. Now, I'm not going to assume that a brother who disagrees with me about an interpretation of the word is a fool and a moron because he disagrees with my interpretation of the word.
Yeah.
I'm going to believe that he might be trying to seek the truth just like me. What I find is that I don't know anyone that is saying, James was wrong when he talked about faith and works. He needs to shut up.
Unless it's Martin Luther.
Well, that's notwithstanding. We end up in a semantics debate about this, which is we're arguing about words while at the same time everybody agreeing. Well, we definitely need to be obedient to Jesus.
Yeah, right. We
Let's
definitely
just
need
start
that.
there.
Yeah,
I think if I had a mentor who was a Presbyterian, whose wife was charismatic. And they were very actively involved in the underground church in China in the 90s. These two were unreal. What an odd match, though. A Presbyterian and a charismatic. And I remember talking about unity, and I'd been really compelled by John 17, Jesus' prayer for all believers. May they be one, Father, as you and I are one, so that the world may know that you sent me. And I'm pretty much saying, man, if everybody could just believe what I believe about the word, then boy, we would just have like unity all over the place. We might have uniformity, but unity is not how that happens.
Yeah.
Not to mention the fact that the implication of unity is for the sake of the mission, for seed sowing, for response to the gospel, for the advancement of the kingdom.
Yeah.
And he said to me, well, what if we tried unifying based on the mission?
Yeah.
And I thought, well, that seems like a pretty good idea, actually. There's some things that I'm going to argue about later if I start with the mission. If I start with, okay, Jesus, you've got my yes.
Yeah.
I'm going to say yes. I bend my knee to your lordship.
Yeah.
And I submit my mouth, my life, and my heart to you. Do what you want to do.
Yeah. That's beautiful, man.
Now I'm going to sow some seeds, right? Like now I'm going to sow some seeds with brothers, and I'm going to see a movement of God. And we're praying for this. Where we live, God, would you bless with so much fruit that our fellowship, our part of the bride of Christ, the church, cannot catch all the fruit by herself. Would you bless all of the church? Would you birth new works that don't exist yet? Because there's so much surplus of the fruit that is being born.
That's good, man.
But that doesn't happen if the followers of Jesus won't sow seed.
Right, and that's the big idea around, like, for example, the miraculous catch of fish, right? When a few episodes ago, we talked about follow me and I'll make you fishers of men.
Yeah.
The miraculous catch of fish is they bring in so much. When Jesus stirs the waters, they bring in so much fish that the nets are breaking. They have to call buddies in with another boat in order to bring in the harvest. And that's when we combine the last principle with prayer and fasting and this principle with abundant seed sowing together, we're going to get such an abundant harvest, man. It's not just going to be our little church in Timbuktu. It's going to be, man, we need every boat. We need all hands on deck. The harvest is plentiful. Jesus has stirred the waters, and he's pouring out revival and awakening, and we've got to have every church involved, all hands on deck. Every person gets to play. Yeah. I mean, that's the abundant harvest that Jesus is talking about, which is beautiful. And that won't happen, though, without radical prayer and fasting and abundant seed sowing. Yeah. If we don't plant any seeds, then there will be no fruit, right? Yeah. And here's the cool thing about it, dude, is that when we're out throwing seeds, The cool thing is, man, like ripe fruit, when it's ready, when God's done a work in somebody's life, ripe fruit does not need to be yanked off the tree. It just falls off in your hand. And so Jesus promises that the harvest is ready. And so as we're out there trying to collect the harvest, throwing seeds when we can, when we encounter people that are open to the gospel, there are people right now that will say yes, and it falls off in your hand.
Yeah.
The flip side of that, that's the problem, is if we don't collect the fruit while it's ready, then the harvest rots and dies and is not collected. And that's the danger about us not being the workers. It's the danger about us not going out and doing the work of God. And so this principle is incredibly important, that we become people and leaders and churches that are abundantly throwing the seeds of the gospel and then going after the harvest with fierceness, with urgency, and with intentionality, because we're missing out on a ton of fruit that the Lord has, and He needs people to step up their game.
Yeah. What would happen if the church in the West began to sow with an expectation and an optimism that God is actually going to do something?
That He's working and moving.
That it's actually going to move forward. You think about the abundance mentality in the Gospels, and there's three stories that link together in the Gospels that are so beautiful. He feeds 5,000, he feeds 4,000 on just a handful of fish and loaves, right? Multiplies them. In the middle of those two stories is a woman who comes to Jesus, who's talking with Jesus. The disciples say the same thing that they say about the 5,000 and the 4,000. Lord, should we send her away? That's their scarcity.
Yeah.
Send them away.
Yeah.
There is not enough.
Yep.
We can't do enough. Yep. Lord, should we send this annoying person away? and I love the exchange that Jesus has with her. He says to this woman, well, it's not right to take the children's bread and give it to the dogs. It's like, what?
Yeah.
What? Like, are you kidding me? Why, Jesus, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
And the woman looks at him and she says, well, even the dogs eat the crumbs, the scraps that fall from the master's table. And Jesus, like, it's so beautiful, his response to her, because it's another one of these, there's faith. That's what I'm talking about. And he's teaching these disciples that have been in the send them away, there's not enough bread mode. Send them away, there's not enough provision. Send them away, there's not enough time. There's not enough for us to meet the need. While they stand next to the master and king of all creation, there's not enough. Jesus, the bread of life, and they think they're going to run out of bread?
Yeah.
Like, what an absurdity. I think that text makes a lot more sense if it is the disciples' jaws that are on the ground and it is Jesus and this woman smiling at each other. Because the fact is, she says, I could survive on your crumbs. And there are crumbs all over those pages. There are crumbs from the 5,000. There's crumbs from the 4,000. 12 basketfuls and 7 left over from both of them. Jesus literally saying, I am enough for everyone. For everyone. Jews, Gentiles, everyone that would call on me, I'm enough.
Yeah.
So why don't we take them up on it?
Yeah.
And say, okay, Jesus, if you're abundant, then we're going to call on your abundance for our culture and our nation, for our community, for our school and family. We're going to call on your abundance. We're even going to risk our lives in your abundance.
Yeah.
And see what happens.
That's good, man. That's so good. Guys, listen, at the end of this episode, I want to give you a couple tools that you can look up in order to help you in this when you're going out to abundantly seed sow. We'd also love to help. We've got several friends of ours that provide training in these things as well. So if you're interested in that, we'd love to help connect you with some training of people that can train you on how to really go out and throw the seeds of the gospel abundantly. But let me say a couple things here. What Jason was just saying there is this, that we've got to come to this with incredible expectation that God is going to be on the move and we get to join him in this work, and there is abundance out there. So therefore we sow with abundance, believing that abundant harvest is coming, which is really, really important. And so as we get out there, okay, let me just share a couple things with you. it's about, part of this principle is about training and equipping as many people as we can in order to live this way and to give them simple, easy tools, which we'll talk about in a later episode. But a couple of them that we may share later, but I want you to go ahead and look up, is if you Google, there are things called like the 15-second testimony that's incredibly easy for you to be able to share your story in like a 15-second period, which we'll talk about in a few minutes, or not in a few minutes, but in a couple episodes. Not right now.
You talking about it for 15 seconds?
Yeah, just boom, 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 boom. So Google that, look that up. I think it could help you tremendously. Another one.
Share your 15-second testimony. I dare you. Can you do it?
Yeah. There was a time in my life when I was incredibly depressed, angry, and frustrated at life. Jesus came in, radically changed me, and brought peace, comfort, and set me on a new trajectory that changed everything. If he can do that in my life, I know he can do it in yours.
Yeah. There was a time in my life where I strived to have and to be and to get noticed and to get credit. But Jesus showed me that I'm a son of God, that I belong to him, that he's my father, and that I'm worthy in his eyes.
Amen, bro. Come on.
15-second testimonies, man. It's beautiful stuff.
They're beautiful. Do you hear that? I mean, that was good, Jace. Come on.
Well, it's not as good as yours. Your testimony is better than mine.
Anyway, but that's it. That's as simple as it is. And there's training out there that can get you to think like that and just say, hey, how do we do that? And there can be multiple versions of it. Another one is the Three Circles gospel presentation. If you look that up, it's so simple and easy to draw it on a napkin or a piece of paper in order to begin to throw the seeds of the gospel when you're in conversation. It can literally take 3 to 4 minutes to share. It's super simple, and I want you to look that up and take a look at it. But at the end of the day, again, like you'll see in all these principles, it's about intentionality and really getting out there and making it happen. I wish, honestly, I could share some stories about when we've gone out evangelistic prayer walking to find people and to throw seeds, which I may in a later episode share some stories around that. But the big thing here, guys, is if we're going to abundantly throw the seeds of the gospel, then we need to be regularly having Jesus on our lips, talking about him frequently, bringing people to a knowledge of how beautiful and amazing and incredible he is. Because at the end of the day, guys, you and I both, all of us, are natural evangelists for stuff that we actually love. So, for example, if I go to a great restaurant, I tell everybody how great that restaurant was because I want them to experience the goodness of what it was. If I see a good movie or a good TV show, I talk about it. We are natural evangelists for things we like.
Yep.
And so we need to tap into that same part of our hearts that does that about tacos and pizza and movies and popcorn, and do it about the thing that's the most important thing in this world and in our soul, and to really desire for people to encounter Jesus. And so I want to encourage you guys, man, this week, what would it look like to start throwing some seeds? What would it look like to have Jesus on your lips a little more often? What would it look like to start praying for people by name who are far from God and asking God for opportunities to share with them? What would it look like to share with the person who cuts your hair, or the barista at Starbucks, or the person that's checking your groceries out at Walmart or whatever? We have got to begin to throw the seeds of the gospel, and when we do, we will see abundant harvest. The more seeds we throw, the more harvest there will be. And so let's become the people that are throwing as much seed as possible.
Man, I dare you to ask this simply. Again, there's a lot of ways to do this. To simply tell someone this week, here's how good it is to follow Jesus. It's the best thing in my life. And you to ask someone, and you already know someone that you should be asking, have you thought about this?
Yeah.
Have you thought about this? And you would be shocked at how many people would say, it's funny, I've been hoping somebody would ask me.
Yeah.
And you don't ask them because you're the expert with all the answers. You ask them because you could say, hey, let's search this together.
Yeah.
Let's take some steps together.
Yeah.
There's no simpler invitation into the first steps of discipleship than that.
Yeah. That's beautiful, man. thank you guys for listening and watching. I hope this has been beneficial and helpful. We have a blast recording these, and as you can tell, we enjoy. But check us out at Discipleship.org. We'd love to come alongside you and help you. And like I said, get you connected to training and equipping or resources that can help you become a disciple who makes disciples. And so let's go after it, guys, until every person's heard, until all areas are reached. Let's give it all we have for the sake of our King Jesus and for his love to be spread among the nations. We love you guys, and hopefully we'll see you again next time.